My name is Michel Paul Richard, and I'm here to talk about my paintings today. The first painting that I'm going to show you is of my wife, Peggy Richard. This is the second marriage for both of us. I always say the first marriage is the marriage of procreation, the second marriage is the marriage of recreation. So this was painted in 1983 when we were both at the State University of New York at Geneseo, and she happened to be looking in the mirror in the living room of my house at that time, and I had the camera, so I made a shot and used the photograph to make the painting. I don't use models because it's too inconvenient. I like to take photographs and work from the photograph. So this is Peggy looking into the mirror, and it's called Reflections. And that was the first oil that I did in recent memory. This is a portrait of my middle son, Paul, who is an artist, a professional artist, and I made this shot when he was living in Brooklyn quite a few years ago. This painting is entitled Bud Byer, Then and Now. This is our gymnastics coach at a 50-year reunion of Accra Theater that I organized. And that's how he looked at that time. And 50 years earlier, he's on the beach at Lake Michigan, and they're tossing the girl to George Hobby, who was featured in my program about sculpture. George Hobby was doing the one-armed back bird with June Fox, and this is another picture of him as he looked in the late 1940s. And the other figure is Bill Goldie, who was the assistant gymnastics coach. Bud Byer was the gymnastics coach for the University of Chicago gymnastics team. And I sent him a photograph of this after it was completed, and I said, Bud, at one point I had you looking like Eisenhower. And he said, well, thanks for not stopping at that point. And the bird symbolizes whatever you want to make it, the passing of time. And as I said, this is Lake Michigan. There was a trainer at the gym at Berkshire Regional Community Center, Berkshire South, where I've been a member for nearly 20 years. And the name of the trainer was Antoine. And I asked him if I could do his portrait, and I took a photo of him. He said, fine. And he looks a little too much like a bodybuilder, so I slimmed him down a little bit. But he's very muscular. And the only thing is, his wife wanted to know who was that woman on the upper right corner. So that's a portrait of Antoine. This is an imaginary landscape supposed to be in upstate New York. And it's a portrait of me with my dog, Tor. And the title of the painting is A Dog and His Man. And Tor has long since passed over, but I still cherish this image. All right, some of my work is in the category of science fiction, And there's nothing fictitious about my neighbor, John McDonnell. One morning, when we were living in Miami, Peggy got a job as university librarian at the University of Miami, and I retired from SUNY Geneseo. And we lived in a historic neighborhood right off Biscayne Bay, and one of my neighbors a block away was John McDonnell. And one morning I went out to see him, and he was dressed exactly like this, with a blue pants and a handkerchief on his head, kerchief, and I said, "Hold it, John." I ran home and got my camera and a pickaxe and went back and told him to hold the pickaxe in two hands and look upward a little bit. And then I did this painting, which is called Digging Europa. Europa is one of the moons of Jupiter, which may have liquid water on its surface. So this was my concept of someone gardening on Europa with one of the moons of Jupiter overhead and also the shadow on Jupiter to the upper right of the red spot. And that was one of my forays into science fiction. This painting is entitled Dana's Big Adventure. Dana is my youngest son, who used to get in one scrape after another. Now he's an attorney in Washington, D.C., and I hope he keeps his license. This is an underwater fantasy, and he is riding a contraption which is part bicycle and part wings. And on the right is a fish that looks vaguely disturbed and moving out of the picture. On the left is a giant squid who is menacing my son Dana as he pedals merrily along underwater. And my son Dana, incidentally, hates this painting, but I love it. I took these photos of my ex-sister-in-law, who's now deceased, and her daughter, Mary and Mary Ellen, at a dinner party in Baltimore. They were not naked, of course, when I took the picture. That's called artist license, what I did later. And the figure in the middle, in case you are having trouble identifying it, is a mandrill, a sort of monkey. And the title of the picture, which is fantasy, the title is Let's Teach Him to Fly. So this shows, again, my interest in fantasy and science fiction. In case you're wondering, these are wings, and these are presumably angels with wings. This painting is entitled The Wrong Tree, and it shows my interest in biblical themes as well as fantasy themes. I had a model for the female, but it doesn't look like the model. It turned out looking like my daughter, Michel. And on the left, my son Paul. That's a pretty good likeness of him in profile. And the serpent, everybody's familiar with that. And this, in case you're wondering, is a photograph of the Earth from space. And the idea behind this painting is that I should give you the title. The title is The Wrong Tree. Why is it the wrong tree? Because they were expressly forbidden to eat from the tree of knowledge. Anything else was okay, including the tree of life. But Eve disobeyed the Lord's command, and Adam followed suit. And the result was that Eve acquired not only the knowledge of good and evil, but also all the sciences. So if Adam and Eve had obeyed the Lord's command, we would have remained in a childlike state for eternity. And this is my conception of Eve as a Promethean figure, and more about that in a few minutes. This is a scene at a nude beach in South Florida, and as you can see, something very strange is happening overhead. A giant squid is leaving the Earth and making his way towards the hole in the ozone layer into outer space. Everybody, all the human beings on the beach, are totally clueless as to what's going on. And what's going on is something like Armageddon. On the lower left is a portrait of one of my granddaughter's friends at the age of about 6. As I recall, her name was Alicia. And on the right is a picture that I got out of National Geographic. It's a nice Irish face. And the setting is called Four Corners, where 4 states meet. And this is very typical of that area. Early morning with very deep shadows. And the title of this painting is, "Where Have All the People Gone?" The idea behind it is that humanity has left the Earth, gone into outer space, but the mountains still remember human faces. There's a kind of collective memory, and these are some of the faces that they remember when there were still human beings living on this planet. The title of this painting is Mothership, and again, it's a reminder of my interest in my early interest in science fiction and fantasy. And the spaceship, which you see here on the lower left, I patterned after a Gucci watch case. That's the rocket, and you can see the flames jetting out of the back of the spaceship. It's round in order to have artificial gravity. And on the upper left is a painting based on a photograph that I found somewhere. And the title is Mothership. And the rocket is on its way to rendezvous with the mothership in the distance. And on the lower left is my version of a black hole. And one night we had guests over for dinner, and I said to Hector, "Hector, do you see the black hole?" And he said, "No, I can't see the black hole. Her belly is too big." And his wife kicked him in the shins at that moment. So that was the inspiration for this. Yeah, a few years ago, I took a course at the Rockwell Museum, offered by a guy whose specialty is the art of the visual joke. And so I think I was inspired by his lectures. This is a knockoff of Rembrandt's The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tulp. And the figure lying comatose on this bench, the face looks like my eldest son, Kevin, although it wasn't intended to look that way. It just happened. And this is a Tonkin monkey who is filling in for the surgeon, and he's got calipers in his hands and his fingers. And when my former wife saw this painting, she said, 6 pictures of Mike and a monkey. That was her take on it. So that is my version of the art of the visual joke. When I was 19, still at the University of Chicago in acro theater, I tried to master the unicycle, and I failed. I just didn't have the patience or the inclination to go on with it. When I turned 60, I decided I wanted to try it again, and this time I taught myself to ride the unicycle, and that was in Miami when we lived there. And I don't know who took the photograph, but the painting was based directly on the photograph. And the title of this painting is Things Learned on Earth We Will Practice in Heaven. So that's my version of heaven. This painting was done when we lived in Beckett in the Berkshires, and that looks pretty much like the house we had in Beckett. And I made gargoyles for the peaks of the roof, one there and one over here. And I was inspired by a line from the book of Job. I think it's from Job. I am a brother to dragons and a companion to owls. And so again, this is an example of the art of the visual joke. The real dragon is looking at the facsimile in horrified fascination, and the owl is just sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen. This painting with the elaborate frame depicts a fairy riding on the back of a dragonfly, and the title of the painting is Thanks for the Ride. Now, I don't know what the definition of miniature painting is. I looked it up online, and it says something painted on an egg. Well, this is not painted on an egg, but it's 7 by 9, and it's the smallest painting I ever made or ever will make. And so that's my version of a miniature. So I want to thank you very much for watching this program, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did giving it. And if you want to get in touch with me for any reason, my email is Michel Paul Richard, spelled like Richard, and Michel has no E on the end of it, or you change my gender without a medical license. Michel Paul Richard @gmail.com. Thanks again.